Welcome, everybody, to our Women's History Month, or Her Story Month celebration of the Laney English Department Women Faculty Reading. Thank you for coming. I lit my LED candle to create some safe space for all of the ancestral spirits of women who came before us, who made it easier for all of us to speak what we need to speak. And just to kind of further christen the space, I brought one of my guardian angels, Maya Angelou, to share her poem, Still I Rise. Yes. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dust, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still, I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes? Shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard? 'Cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meetings of my guys? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling. I hear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. I'd love to introduce Leslie Stratford, the head of our art gallery and our art program here, to tell you a little bit about the space we're gathered in today in the special exhibit of faculty.
Hello everybody, and thank you for coming to the Gene Steingart Gallery. I have to rise after that. Every semester we have the opportunity to bring 3 exhibitions to this gallery. And it's all done with the gallery management staff, who are students, 4 of whom are standing here in our doorway as well. And they aren't usually all here until Wednesday when we have our class. But this semester, the gallery management class and I were requested to bring a Women's History Month exhibition to our gallery. And so because we wanted to be all-inclusive, we asked all 4 campuses, women on all 4 campuses, whether they were artists in the art department or artists elsewhere, staff and faculty, to participate. And so the work that you see around you today is indicative of that, as well as a couple of invitational artists that we have asked to bring onto our campus. So the work that you see are done by faculty from College of Alameda, Berkeley City College, Merritt, and of course we have all of the female staff from the art department here at Laney participating. We're so glad to have you here. I can't tell you how many times I have been thanked for your participation in this season of exhibitions. We've had wonderful turnout for the receptions and for activities like this. So please think about the gallery as being your second home. Visit us often, and please remember to bring your friends as well. And if you have any idea for exhibitions in the future, bring those to me as well. Okay? Thank you and enjoy.
our first reader, Raffi del Bourgo. She has let me know that after 17 years, she is retiring at the end of this semester, so it is a special treat to celebrate that with her. Raffi's poems have been published widely in American, Australian, and Canadian journals. 6 poems are included in the 2011 Chapter and Verse Poems of Jewish Identity. Awards include the 2003 Lowwater Prize. In 2007, 2008, and 2013, she won first prize in the Maggie Meyer Poetry Competition. In 2010, the Allen Ginsberg Award. In 2012, the Pomak Award. And in 2013, she came in first place for the Northern California Writers Prize. In 2014, she won the New Millennium Prize for Poetry. She's been nominated for the Pushcart Prize 3 times. Please welcome Raffi.
Thank you. Margaret, there are chairs up here. Oh, it's great to see you all here today. I don't usually see you in places like this. Okay, the first poem is called Black Lizard. I found a small, petrified lizard, black, perfect toes, perfect tail, its eyes closed as if briefly asleep. I lifted it carefully, carried it home, and placed it on a scrap of white velvet in a plastic case. Put the case on my dresser top. My lover said, "That is most unusual." I said, "I'm going to call him Lislo." Events unfurled this way. The lover was too young, his knuckles unbloodied, teeth white as the idea of youth itself, and I sent him away to find. He left behind only a shirt printed with flowers, with sailboats. "I've been to sea," I told Lislo, when the waves folded like the pages of a book. At night in the harbor, the moon bled milk. I drank quickly so it wouldn't sour. At night in the harbor, the moon seeped a cloud of mist. I inhaled and filled my lungs with silver light. In early morning, I took off my woman's suit, swam in circles with fishes, melancholy and noble. Everything was splash. Everything was chrysanthemum, delphinium. Let me summarize matters for you so far. I sent a young lover out to find. I spent some days talking to a lizard, perfect but dead. This is what I explained to Lislo. I was grateful not to be a shark, an eel, a jelly, a desolate narwhal. I swam until I became blue, and when I returned to the boat, I no longer cast a shadow. This is called Roses and Moons. My mother died about 15 years ago, and I wrote this for her. Roses and Moons. Through the window, a thumbnail moon caught in the greedy fingers of a winter bare quaking aspen. It is the color of gold and reminds me of Mother's Ormolu clock with an inscription reading, "Lost hours are never found again." She lies in her bed, a great blue heron, that patient hunter, atop her chest. There is a blush of rose along its neck. It is immobile for many minutes, then plunges its dagger-sharp beak deep into her breastbone. She cries out once, twice, then lapses into silence. The bird cocks its head, listening to the heart still beating. On a nearby table, with a card from the sender, the requisite roses, flower of love, stuck in a cut glass vase, the thick stems wrapped with a crimson ribbon. The satin has twice been pierced with thorns. I am so very, very small. I live in her sweater drawer, among the cashmeres and merinos. The drawer is always ajar, so I can stand on a rose-red cardigan and peer over the edge. If I were big enough, strong enough, I would sweep away that blue-gray bird with a broom. Let it perch on the horns of that moon tangled in the aspen tree. If I were strong enough, I would sit my mother up, feed her toast with marmalade, tart and sweet. As the clock ate time with its little wheels, I would float the brush through her halo of hair, then gently bathe her face, her shoulders and back with the softest sponge and warm water scented with lavender. My father died a long time ago, and this is an epistolary poem in the form of a letter, and it's called Dear Father. Dear Father, this year I turned 67, the age grandfather was when he died, the age grandmother was when she died, your age when you died. Since you left 30 years ago, I have read 2,000 books, if you count the mystery trash, and loved every word. I stopped eating the crusts of bread which always taste dry and burned, even when they're not. I balance my fork like you taught me. Husband number one was a romantic error. Father, I cut him loose and he flew free. After many companions, I settled in with husband number two, 29 years and counting. He gently bites my shoulders to wake me in the morning. Father, look at the cat, lifting her head, love eyes half closed. She's lying on our couch, painted in sun. And look, on the sideboard, there is one last piece of apple pie. Father, I am still so very hungry. This last poem is long. I have a friend who lives in Point Reyes, and she used to have this dog I loved. Big dog, 135 pounds, half black lab and half English mastiff. And she used to call me and say, oh, can you come take care of Hank? And if I could, I always did. And one night I was alone in the house. She doesn't have keys, so the doors don't lock. And Hank, who's usually very quiet, all of a sudden went, whoa, whoa. Oh my God, I sat up, my heart was pounding, and I looked all around and I couldn't see anything, and the doors don't lock. And I got back into bed and I couldn't sleep. My heart was pounding and I was still kind of shaking. And I thought, well, if I can't sleep, I may as well write a poem. So that's what I did. This is called Barking Point Reyes. In the dark gloss of night, he is barking and I am awake. He's barking at raccoons fighting to get into his food on the front porch. At the orchard, where a flock of quail with sequins for eyes hunker down for cover in a nest of wild grasses, and deer eat pears at dawn. Barking at coyotes yipping on the wetlands of Tamales Bay. The splintered cold, 3 in the morning, he is barking at the strange man creeping around with the long sharp knife trying to be quiet on the gravel driveway. Barking at termites chewing up the foundations of the house. At the war far away, at the melting glaciers, financial meltdown, at the complexity of healthcare, barking at a flocks of wild turkeys, one male gobbling from his roost. He is barking at ravens, glossy and moonless, like the night of my senior prom. Pale blue strapless dress, white roses at the waist, with the guy who asked me, not the guy I wanted to ask. Barking, another friend just died, one more name to cross out of my address book, or because the whole East Coast was splintered by cold, then sweltering, sweat dripping down the back, because poisonous squid hide deep in cracks between rocks, or because there are no poisonous squid off the coast of California. barking at sleeping quail, bobbing head feathers on a moonless 3 in the morning. He is barking at coyotes chewing off the edges of Tamales Bay, 100 yards west of us, San Andreas Fault silently tearing the whole earth apart. Barking. My thumb has started to hurt. I can't open jars. My friends have lines in their hair. Their faces are gray, the dark gloss of night, owl nesting in the cypress, the long, sharp creeper. He is barking at the knife. A venomous young man, barking mad, tries to shoot, tries to explode, barking because there are no poisonous squid. Just black ink as they disappear, black ooze of oil in the Gulf of Mexico, another brown pelican on a nest of dead eggs. Barking because of the soldiers, dead and alive, vanished in the mountains of far away. The rattle of the metal can, raccoons on the front. No, because of the earthquake, another country far away, broken into fragments. The mothers who grabbed their children too hard made them cry. The mothers who couldn't rescue. He is barking at the folding of cloud upon cloud, thick shawl around the moon, in the earliest part of morning, the dark gloss still on the night, quail, black sequins for eyes, hidden among cattails near the pond, late rainstorm on the horizon, barking at the noise like a car door slamming, the strange knife, termites demolishing the foundations of this house, barking at men and women, snow-tipped mountains, or thirsty deserts of far away. He is barking at Bedouin camels. No, at miners deep underground, coal dust in the lungs, barking at still no jobs, empty wallet, people with sequins for eyes, waiting in line for water, for pears, for the capsule to ascend from the bowels of hell, and all those bodies still buried under rubble. The owl shudders in the cypress. Now he is asleep on his dog bed, dreaming of his walk on Limantour Beach, people stroking his ears, big black dog, beautiful dog, the strained light wet on pink sand. I am at the window because of the orchard where deer eat succulent, in the long sharp, in the moonless, raccoons chase one another, chittering among the trees, apples and pears, far away and yet very close. I lie down beside him on the dog bed, my face, my hands in the fur of his neck, his breath slow now and rhythmic, his feet remembering pink, wet sand. Out by the pond, the quail, sequins for eyes, and overhead, the raven flies invisible. Thank you. I hate to read and run, but that's what I'm going to do.
Thank you, Raffi. Thank you so much. I think there's a couple more seats up here if people want to come sit. We have a few spots over here. Our next reader is Judy Juanita, or as I like to call her, the OG of the English department. Her poetry and fiction have been published widely in plays produced in the Bay Area and New York City. Her novel, Virgin Soul, on sale over there, about a young black woman joining the Black Panther Party in the 1960s, was published by Viking in 2013. Thank you. Please welcome Judy Juanita.
Thanks. So Virgin Soul is set right here in Oakland, and even closer, it's right at the old Oakland City College, which was Merritt College, which is now Merritt College. So it's set between 1964 and 1968. So I'm just going to read just a little bit from the beginning to give you the setting, little facts. Uncle Boy Boy was a dentist, and Aunt Olray was his wife, and I was not their adored child. I was more obligation than kin, their dark-skinned orphan in residence. I had gotten accepted into San Francisco State as a freshman but my financial resources amounted to my $72 monthly Social Security check. I wasn't about to ask them to support me. It was 1964 in Oakland, California, and the Monday after I graduated high school, I hot-footed over to Oakland City College and registered. Very soon thereafter, I moved to the Berkeley YWCA for $12.50 a week and kept my head attached to a dictaphone at the Alameda County Welfare Department 20 hours a week to earn my way through school. Thus, 1 month out of high school, July 1964, I hit Oakland City College's summer session. The powers that be had changed the name to Merritt College and were building a Hills campus, but we called it City. A raggedy in the flatlands, couldn't pass the earthquake code, stimulating, politically poppin' repository of blacks who couldn't get to college any other way, whites who had flunked out of the University of California, and anybody else shrewd enough to go free for 2 years and transfer to Berkeley, prereqs zapped. Other colleges may have been places where one and all rushed to finish, but at City, the eyes stayed on and on, growing not necessarily wiser, but hipper. If women stayed longer than 2.5 years, they were old meat. I learned fast what I wanted to be. When I got there, Huey Newton had been there a few, old as salt. His girlfriend's locker was next to mine. She and I took tennis and French together and traded notes for Western Civ. I didn't know diddly about the Greeks being invaded by the Romans, but Margaret, whose parents were Greek, knew it like the back of her hand. Our lockers were right next to my journalism classroom, where I was always dashing out of the newsroom, fancying myself a kind of cub reporter on a mission around the school. Journalism was exciting, where English 1A was stifling. I got used to Huey's high-pitched voice asking me, "Have you seen Margaret?" He was always looking for her. She and I practiced often lobbing shots in the court and using our mock du jour. Sometimes we walked to her parents' house, a colonial 3-story on nearby College Avenue, talking French all the way. They made a strange couple. Margaret was white, tall, and husky-voiced, and had dark hair down to her waist, and gushed upper middle class. Huey was short and cute, but street. With his pop-out-of-nowhere demeanor and pointy-toe shoes, he fit my image of a crazy nigga. What I loved was listening to the black intellectuals and white boys from the W.E.B. Du Bois Club talk. My friends lumped all of them together as communists. On hot afternoons, we sat for hours on the front lawn, cutting class or coming back after class to see if they had fainted from heat prostration. I was there about as often as I was in class. Their language made no sense to me. Fair play for Cuba sounded like U.S. volleyball teams going to Havana. So then she gets through freshman, sophomore, junior years, and she's over at San Francisco State, and she has run into Huey and Bobby a number of times, and gradually has become very radicalized. So here she is on page 240, let's put it like that. Huey got into it with the pigs last night. One pig is dead, the other one's hurt, he said. We hadn't even put robes on. What happened to Huey? He's in critical condition. He looked at us like we were totally behind the train. It's going down. Get yourself together and stop worrying about being cute. We had to put out a special edition of the paper. We had to get attorneys. We had to mobilize the community. We had to raise money. I crossed the bay to see the only people I knew with money. Uncle Boy Boy and Aunt Ola were presiding at their dinner table. I had come for money, ashamedly. Neither a borrower nor a beggar be. When I walked in the door, the first thing Ola did was give me a new straw bag. She knew I loved big purses. I hugged and thanked her. "What costume you got planned for Halloween, Niecy?" Uncle Boy Boy knew Halloween was my favorite holiday, but Huey had been shot October 28th. Boy Boy was avoiding asking about school. I didn't want to lie about school, and he didn't want lies at the table either. Let's skip this up. Aunt Ola directed, Uncle Boy Boy, you know I don't ask for money, but the party needs bail money for the brothers who have been harassed by the police. We need money to pay the printer for the paper. We just need it. So most of us are asking our folks to contribute. Aunt Ola directed the conversation away from reality. Nisi, do you know that Hopalong Cassidy waved directly at your cousin like he was a little hero during a parade in downtown Oakland in the 50s? I nodded. She teared a little. I'd heard this one. What difference does a fake Hopalong Cassidy make? Did money float out of his pockets and land in my cousin's lap? Aunt Ola showed me a picture of Corliss, my cousin, graduating from Lone Mountain, throwing her cap in the air, her hair completely natural. Aunt Ola remarked, oh, her hair doesn't look like such a bad grade. Maybe the luster silk had a residual effect. The meatloaf with its ketchup covering the au gratin potatoes from scratch, the fresh mustard greens tasted different. Ola's cooking had improved, or I was eating on the run in too many crap soul food joints. Uncle Boy Boy brought reality back into play. Cousin Reddy seen your boy in the jailhouse. Reddy say they put Newton in the hole in the county jail. They call it the soul breaker. But I hear your boy is holding up. Reddy say that policeman Huey shot was a badass. Says he was hard on ordinary Negroes, but kept his distance from the pimps. Now you know that ain't right. Uncle Boy Boy, that's the original stimulus for the party. Patrol the ghetto to prevent the police from mistreating us. Uncle Boy Boy kept with what he wanted to say. Reddy also say the OPD the night of the shootout looking for 2 male Negroes riding around. And they knew that your boy had a big fuzzy natural and was light skinned. Sound like a setup to me. Uncle Boy Boy, the original missing man. My uncle leaned back. Oh, the original invisible man. Uncle Boy Boy leaned back. My passing white cousin, Reddy, knows how to keep his mouth shut until he needs to open it. Ola had left the price tag on the straw bag. I never gave you a gift proper for your graduation from Oakland City College. I pulled the tack off the straw bag and began putting the contents of my worn leather purse in it, including an issue of the Black Panther Intercommunal News Service. As I looked at it, I decided to show it to them. Here's the very first issue of the paper. Did you work on that, Nisi? Aunt Ola asked, beginning to read the front page. No, I wasn't a member yet. I knew about the Panthers, but hadn't joined. The banner headline was, Who Killed Denzel Dowell? Was this the young man in Richmond? Uncle Boy Boy got his reading glasses out. I nodded. You know, I said, when the Richmond pigs shot the 2 others before they gunned down Denzel, the coroner found bullet holes in their armpits. My goodness, Aunt Ola said, does that mean they had their arms blown off? Ola, Uncle Boy Boy scrutinized the paper. The police shot the young brothers while they were holding their arms up over their heads like they had been asked to do. So the Panthers, he said, looking at the paper, are going to patrol the community and patrol the pigs. Aunt Ola admonished Boy Boy, now dear, don't you start calling policemen that word. And she turned to me. Why do you use that horrible term anyway? Uncle Boy Boy leaned back from the paper. Ola, these young people are reminding us that the Gestapo in World War II did the same thing. Those Nazis treated Jews the same way, came into their communities, brutalizing and killed, shipped them off to the camps because they were a different race, same problem, different time, prejudice, hatred. Aunt Ola, I said, Bobby Seale says a policeman is a pig when he violates the constitutional rights and even human rights of the very people he's sworn to protect. All police, dear? Ola, the ones who shoot black boys in the armpits. Boy Boy placed his finger next to Denzel Dowell's image in the Black Panther Party newspaper. Ola picked up the paper and began reading it again. But what really frightens me, Nisi, are the guns. why do you need to fight violence with violence? She said, getting more stressed with each page she turned. This is a very dark world, Janice. And why are there so many cartoons with killing and blood? Aunt Ola, this is what's happening here, not just down south. Why do you think people are rioting in all the big cities? Chicago, Detroit, LA. The police have taken the power that we have given them and abused it. They think it's all right to trample on black people. Answer my question, Nisi, about violence. You know it's about violence. Don't play with me. I'm not as dumb as you like to think. I sighed. Ola's hackles were up. Huey P. Newton says that we're going to defend ourselves against any racist attacks. It's a way of showing the people that they don't have to take all this brutality sitting down. They need to form neighborhood patrols. They need to put some fear into the pigs' hearts. Are you a parent for these older men? They prey on younger women, you know, especially idealistic ones. Have they asked you for sex, Nisi? No, Ola, actually, they're perfect gentlemen. What? She was astounded. Manners were as important as beliefs to Ola. I was beginning to feel less shitty about asking for money. Yes, they are. I met Huey at Oakland City. His girlfriend's locker was right next to mine. Did he begin indoctrinating you then? Ola, Uncle Boy busted in. You know Nisi's too hard-headed to be indoctrinated. She's just a natural rebel who's afraid of cats. She likes some damn panthers but hates cats. Well, do they hate white people? Ola was beginning to soften up. I told her, that's a cultural nationalist position. Black pride in wearing the big afros. But Nisi, you've been doing those things since you started college. Aren't you a cultural nationalist? I shook my head. An afro doesn't stop bullets. Black pride is not a weapon against police brutality, and the Panthers have alliances with with white radicals, something Allwood and his group would never do. Yeah, but all this started from those ideas of Allwood, did it not? Allwood was smarter than I thought. Ola was smarter than I thought. I give Allwood credit, I said. He introduced me to many ideas and books, but he wasn't radical. A radical gets to the root of a problem. Books alone can't change the problem. Somebody has to take action on the theories. That's why I became an activist. Uncle Bourgo walked out of the room, raising his voice so I could hear him. Now, Nisi, you all call yourselves black revolutionaries. Off the pig, you teach the young people. Death to this racist system. You're teaching yourselves to bring the system down, kill or be killed. Give me liberty or give me death. But when the man turns on you because you turned on him, you want to cry foul play, and you want us to give you our hard-earned money for your beloved defense committee, for something you willfully brought on yourselves. Now I ask you, does it make sense for me to give you my hard cash so you can make a white lawyer rich, the bail bondsman rich, and the newspapers rich, running behind and quote you on the 6 o'clock news? He came back in the dining room with a small white envelope and shoved it in my purse. Uncle Boy, you know I don't like asking anybody for anything. Yeah, like your pops, he said, hard-headed, but you're swimming in catastrophe here. When I pulled up to the Bay Bridge and opened the straw purse for the toll, I found a note from Uncle Boy with $200 in 20s, 10s, 5s. Cash my relatives had paid him for their dental work, bill by Sweaty Bill. The note said, be careful, I don't want to pick you up in a pine box. Pinned on the note was another $75 that I knew from the way it was pinned was Aunt Ola's doing. My people knew the police weren't right. Every tribe had sent one like me into the Black Panther Party, the People's Army, to grieve the system. The roots of the Black Panther Party lay in the goodwill of the black community and its utter disgust with the occupying army called the police. Our relatives were our invisible members. To cut these roots would have been disastrous.
Okay. Our next reader is Sonja Franeta, a writer, educator, and activist born in the Bronx, New York, to an immigrant Yugoslav family. She attended NYU, and there, captivated by the Russian language and its literary masters, she received a master's in Russian literature. She continued her studies in comparative literature at UC Berkeley. Her translations and articles about Russian queers and other writings have appeared in the US and internationally. My Pink Road to Russia, her new book, is a collection of her memoir, essays, stories, and poems in English. She's also a beloved faculty member whom we love dearly.
It's really an honor to be here and to read to you a little bit from my book. My book is actually not all about Russia. Some of it is about my family background, being an activist, being a machinist, going to Kosovo, going to South Africa. There are all kinds of things in the book. So I hope you enjoy it, those who get it. I'm going to read from a story called Amazon Sisters on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And this was 1992 in Russia, so it had just, come out of the Soviet Union. A lifelong dream of mine was to travel across Russia on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. My sense of romance, my Slavic heritage, my studies in Russian literature, my left leanings, all pointed me in that direction. I yearned to cross one of the most enigmatic countries in the world and experience its expanse firsthand. So I'm skipping a little. Lana and Asya, who are friends I met the summer before, both in their early 20s, stood in line at the Vokzal railroad station and bought an entire compartment with 4 berths to Novosibirsk on a regular passenger train, not the express. First class was not available on this particular train. First class is 2 berths, soft class in Russian. Second class was one where was the one we were in, the common or coupe with 4 berths. Then there's a third class Platzkart, which is open berths, no closed compartments, and fourth class is bare benches. Foreigners often arrange trips on the Trans-Siberian through travel agencies in the U.S. and are separated into special first class cars for foreigners. In May of 1992, through my friends, paid 350 rubles each, about $3 for the entire trip to Novosibirsk, 5,200 kilometers, 97 hours on the train. The Trans-Siberian is the longest continuous track in the world. Our starting point, Khabarovsk, built on the banks of the Amur River, is more than a century old. So now to the train ride. I rocked to the clicking sounds and gave myself over to the movement. Lana and Asya sat opposite me on the maroon fake leather berth. We smiled and gazed out the window. They were a beautiful couple. Asya with short, dark brown hair and dark eyes. Lana with permed blonde hair and hazel eyes. They were often touching or hugging. I enjoyed their intimacy. Ice was thawing and green marshland filtered the running rivulets rushing to join a river. Siberia has 53,000 rivers. The main 3, the Ob, the Yenisei, and the Lena, flow north into the Arctic Ocean. The Amur River, which we were crossing, flows into the Pacific. I thought of how water could carve land, widening rivers, creating lakes, mud, and marsh. I had left San Francisco in the midst of a drought. Green meadows sparkled in the spring sun. It was downright warm in May in Siberia. Yet Americans have an image of Siberia as a land of permanent ice and snow. Taiga, dense forests of spruce, birch, and ribbons of pines from afar wound across the flat or sometimes rolling landscape. The tundra was farther north and dominated by permafrost. I had heard about the Kamchatka Peninsula. I imagined it to be similar to the California coast, but barren, with active volcanoes and miles of majestic coastal views. As soon as the train quit lurching forward and found its rhythm, Lana set to work arranging our little coupe. She found a rag, wet it, and cleaned all the areas we would be contacting. The cheap vinyl headrests above our berths, the tables, the doorknobs. "This train is a lot cleaner than the one we took to get here," she said, shaking her head. By the way, they had to come all the way from Novosibirsk to meet me all the way to Khabarovsk, which is like going from California to New York. It was amazing they did this. The conductor, a large woman, Provodnitsa is what they called her, a large woman in a navy blue uniform with dyed dark red hair and thick eyebrows, suddenly appeared at our doorway with a bored look on her face, holding a pile of clean linens and muttering something. Lana paid her and then began making up our bunks, as if she were working at her hospital. She was a nurse by profession. To get out of Lana's way, Asya and I stood in the corridor. Lana pointed down to the other end of the car. Tea was supposedly available, but the provodnik, the male, or the provodnitsa, female, would decide when. The massive samovar in each car was heated by coal and had to be tended by each car's conductor, something she or he didn't always feel like doing. Later that year, on another trip, when I became frustrated waiting for service, I crossed into the next car. A young woman looked me up and down suspiciously and said, "And which car do you belong in?" as if I had crossed some forbidden border. The next one, I pushed past her to get my water and left before she could complain further. That was after I learned how to be rude. Men in army uniforms passed close to Asya and me in the corridor. "We may be the only women in the entire car," Asya remarked, checking my reaction. I told her I had taken self-defense classes before leaving San Francisco. She laughed. Asya had a certain confident elegance about her. We settled in. I took the lower right berth, Lana the lower left, and Asya the upper left. We all sat on the lower ones for now, arranging our things. Asya took out of her backpack a glass bottle, an empty plastic orange soda bottle, a McDonald's styrofoam cup, 2 metal cups, and some small squares of paper that I realized were napkins. I took out my Walkman and the latest Farron and Jane Seabury tapes and some queer magazines. Lana and Asya, looking hungrily at the magazines, smiled as I turned over the treasures to them. Before they could even get into them, a man opened our compartment door and without a word handed us a folder of 8 by 11 American photos of male bodybuilders and female fashion models. He apparently wanted us to buy them. We shook our heads no. The man had opened our door as if it were his compartment. No knocking, no excuse me. I was also surprised by the Provodnitsa's power. She even chose when and how loudly to play the radio. We could turn down the sound of Russian rap in our compartment, but not in the corridors. The train was not the only place during my travels through Russia that I noticed this controlling air of the person in charge and the submissiveness of those they were in charge of, an unwillingness to challenge the status quo. The toilets on the train were unbelievably disgusting. I later learned that this also depended on the provodnik and provodnitsa, on the age of the train. At first, the smell and filth of the toilet was so overpowering I couldn't even stay in there for long. There was no toilet paper or soap. You had to bring your own in. The rocking of the train made it difficult not to touch the dirty toilet seat. I had to hang on to the bar on the wall beside the toilet to prevent contact. Of course, there were no showers. Every other day I would take a washcloth bath, which was refreshing in the pervasive metallic and grimy atmosphere. In our coupe, I took naps, lulled by the swaying train and the smell of clean sheets. It was the best way to get over jet lag. There was something comforting about sleeping whenever you wanted to. The girls pored over their magazines. Like children with new toys, they shared my Walkman, and occasionally one got impatient and snatched it away from the other, who of course resisted. Anyway, in our homey little coupe, Asya called Lena Koshka, which means cat, and Lena called Asya Zayats, which means rabbit. Often they use these endearments in front of other train travelers. Whenever I remarked on their public affection, they laughed, "Oh, we're sisters, Amazons." The word for sisters in Russian can also mean cousins. Their romance made them glow. Their slurpy kisses echoed from the upper berth. We talked into the night as though we were at camp, Asya's dimples deepening as she laughed, and Lena's animated face appearing as she lifted her head from Asya's lap to say something. And then I have some little interviews with them. Thank you.
Sonja and Judy's books are both for purchase over there. Our next reader is our newest full-time hire in the English department, and we are so blessed to have her. Laney Economides Gastis is a former crime, culture, and religion reporter that teaches reading and writing of all levels. She is a Laney alumna. Laney believes in the powerful result of connecting student writing and critical thinking to the outside world. When she's not teaching, she enjoys traveling to Greece to visit her family. Laney Economides Gastis.
So I thought it was fitting to discuss my grandmother today. She's a woman that really, I think, embodies a lot of the qualities of loyalty and sacrifice and dedication that so many other women have. So this is a little something I wrote about her. My grandmother was a rich woman. The small teapot hidden on the top left corner of her kitchen cabinet counter was where she kept her stash. From a small teapot, my family grew, steeped in the rich tradition of struggle and hope. "Wake up, I'll give you some money," she would whisper, clothed in her usual black attire, her whiskers tickling my jet-lagged face. That day in particular, the last one where she was able to cook for me, I rolled over and ignored her offer, unaware of what she had to give me. It was much more than money. I spent summers with my family in Athens as a lanky and awkward child and loved to give spontaneous choreographed dance performances in the middle of the living room. During those performances, I remember my biggest fan, my grandmother, smiling as she watched me from the couch. See, every summer we'd return to the homeland where my grandmother, Anna Christodoulou, waited for me. It was only several summers later that I would discover how special she really was. My grandmother was born in a village in Cheronia, Greece, made famous because of a battle that advanced the Macedonian Empire. The lion sculpture that sits proud and tall at the site of the ancient battleground was indicative of the life she would lead. See, my grandmother's whole life was defined by her battles. My grandmother would end up with my grandfather, the chief of police in their quiet town, after months of incessant flirting. She was young once, though it was hard to imagine, young and curvy and bright-eyed. It was even harder to imagine my proper and uptight grandmother deeply involved in the process of courting my grandfather. She would leave a trail of matches outside her window to get my grandfather's attention. When her brother found out that they were in love, he beat my grandmother to a pulp. Nice Greek girls didn't marry anyone that wasn't hand-selected for them like a ripe fig from the backyard. My grandfather eventually came to ask her abusive brother for her hand in marriage. Whatever my grandfather said worked, because soon after she left for northern Greece and married my grandfather. At this time, the Civil War was underway and times were tough. Nevertheless, my grandparents were deeply in love and had two children, my father Spiros and my aunt Eleni. On one fateful day, as my grandfather set out for duty, my father, then a child, was inconsolable. My grandmother said he tore my grandfather's epaulet medals because he was holding on to him so tightly. This behavior was very uncharacteristic of my father. Things were already difficult, and my grandmother's battle was just beginning. As the war raged on, Greece became more and more divided, and people were hungry. Communist guerrillas tried to overthrow the democratic leadership and were wreaking violent havoc on poor Greek towns. My grandfather, who was stationed in the town of Halkida in northern Greece, had received a visit from the spouses and children of a communist leader that was held in a local jail. The women begged and pleaded with my grandfather to release 3 nameless men back to their families. They'd leave, they said. They'll never turn back. He let them go. They lied. That night, on the way home, my grandfather was targeted for revenge. He was shot point blank in the forehead as he drove home. He died instantly. The communist guerrillas stole my grandfather's clothes and watch and set his Jeep on fire. They were only eventually brought to justice because one of them was dumb enough to be found wearing my grandfather's watch that they stole off of his dead body. My father, who was 5 at the time, vividly remembers my grandmother collapsing and wailing when the police came to tell her that her husband was assassinated. She wore black every day of her life until the day she died. She lit candles and prayed for my grandfather whenever she had a chance. She might have even had a second chance at love, but she didn't want it. My grandmother told me that a rich doctor came to ask for her hand in the 1950s, but she refused. She could never devote herself to another man. There was no love like the kind I had for your grandfather, she said. Life was never the same. In patriarchal Greece during this time, if you were fatherless, you were called an orphan. Not because you were in an orphanage, but because women were not expected to care adequately enough for their children without a man in the picture. So, Anna Christodoulou and her 2 orphans left for Athens, where they lived in a dirt floor basement of a house on St. Pantelimonos Street. Like St. Pantelimonos himself, who was known for helping the poor, my grandmother also prioritized her wealth. From the small pension she received from her husband's death and some money she received from her family's farming venture back in Keronia, she tucked money away and never spent a penny on herself. Her priority was the education of her children, which she believed would change their lives. Although they had no money, she applied for scholarships to the best schools in Athens. She took buses downtown and would share her woes with anyone that would listen. She prodded my father and my aunt to push harder, to study harder, to work harder. My father studied with bombs exploding outside and with rats nibbling at his toes. After a series of scholarships for his K-12 education, he was awarded a Fulbright scholarship in the 70s and came to the University of Texas. He had $100 in his pocket when he arrived. There, he finished his PhD. My father went on to become an educator, to start his family, and instill my grandmother's values in his own children. My grandmother ended up saving enough money back home to build her own house on St. Pantelimonos Street. She built an empire out of her sadness. Her personality was split most of the time, switching between intense sadness and introspection and loud bouts of hilarious one-liners. I remember her telling me with a pointed, arthritic finger, "That dress makes you look fat. Don't ever wear it again." She didn't wait for a reaction. She didn't restrain herself. She was raw and she was real. Okay, Grandma, in retrospect, the dress wasn't so flattering. My grandmother would probably be embarrassed by the amount of attention I'm giving her today, despite her free-flowing and boisterous criticisms of everything and everyone else. One summer, a year before her death, she lost her ability to speak. She lasted until age 91, confined to a wheelchair and dependent on her in-home care nurse. Minutes before she died, my aunt said she uttered an eerie sentence. "Ah, si, sir. Is it you?" Perhaps Grandma was finally reunited with her love after all. I'm convinced she lived so long because she had a thirst for life, for enhancing everyone else's experience and never expecting anything in return. Her teapot full of folded currency was the well for everyone's future but her own. She was a lioness, like her hometown mascot, protecting and guarding others as part of a ruthless plan to reclaim her own happiness. How could I forget the summers I spent with her? How could I forget her steadfast dedication and her fierce femininity? When King Philip ascended on those that lost their lives after the battle at Cheronia in 553 BC, he said, "Perish any man who suspects that these men either did or suffered anything that was unseemly." I didn't have a chance to bid my warrior farewell, to cover her lifeless eyes with coins as they did in the ancient world. To my grandmother and to all of the other warrior women that we've lost, I bid you a safe journey home. We will always honor you.
I feel her. Our next reader is Andrena Zawinski. She's teaching a creative writing class here this semester. She's received a PEN Oakland Award in 2010 for her poetry collection, Something About, from Blue Light Press in San Francisco. Her Traveling in Reflected Light from Pig Iron Press in Youngstown received a Kenneth Patchen Prize in poetry. She's also authored 4 chapbooks, and her work appears widely in print, including the Blue Collar Review of Progressive Working Class Literature, the Progressive Magazine, Journal of Jungian Thought, and many, many others. She teaches creative writing and composition at Laney and is features editor at Poetry Magazine. She hails from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but has made her home in the Bay Area since 2000.
You know, there are so many reasons why people are late for events. Mine today was very unexpected. I had a student so dedicated to coming into making up a midterm. He came from dialysis and was really in the hospital, so I'm sorry, but I stayed until I finished it. In our library, we have this fabulous exhibit from Oakland Quilters of quilts, and I just would love to know more about them. I think one of them has kind of a narrative in it, but they're more artful. I saw this exhibit of called The Narrative Thread in Washington, D.C. at the Women's Art Museum once, and it really impressed me because they all did have narratives and all told stories. It seems that an East Indian village where the women were of the lowest class and had no way of surviving on their own were visited by a social service agency that got them to take back the practice of contest or quilt making, which they used to do to celebrate birth. They'd have stories of births and marriages and all that sort of thing. And when they did it, they told a different story in modern days. And those quilts were sold worldwide, and those women are now economically independent there. None of them are thrown onto the pyre when the husband dies. So this is a villanelle, you'll hear repetitive verse in here, for the practice of contest, and I call it after the exhibit, The Narrative Thread. They stitch as if we need these blankets to crawl under, these thoughts that toss sweet dreams into fretful nights. They stitch patches of stories onto a tongue of cloth. They stitch girls left to sicken, to die, books torn from them. Stitch in women's fisted faces on a stammer of speech. They stitch as if we need these blankets to crawl under. They take to needle and thread in a revolution of stitch, stitch, speaking in streets without asking for permission. They stitch patches of stories onto a tongue of cloth. They stitch women veiled at home, poisoned widows, stitch mango groves to chemical spills, wheat fields to AIDS. They stitch as if we need these blankets to crawl under. They stitch girls burned by in-laws at husbands' pyres, stitch palms ripe with fruit, gang rapes at the hands of authority. They stitch patches of stories onto a tongue of cloth. They stitch quilts for shoppers to slip under with dreams, to sleep between borders, stitched in a revolution of fingers. They stitch as if we need these blankets to crawl under. They stitch patches of stories onto a tongue of cloth. This is a relatively new piece. I saw there's a Cesar Chavez exhibit in the library as well, and I mentioned to a couple of librarians that I wish I'd seen Dolores Huerta's picture in there because she was co-founder of Farm Workers. So I have this poem on me that I dedicate to Dolores Huerta. She received the Medal of Freedom from in the Obama White House in 2011. And in an interview shortly after, she said that all the work she did in the civil rights movement, she was kind of disappointed that not enough had been done for women. And she said that she declared herself at 82 years old then, born-again feminist. So this is dedicated to her. It's called Women of the Fields. The women of the fields clip red bunches of grapes in patches of neatly tilled farmland in the San Joaquin. Clip sweet globes they can no longer stand to taste. Just 20 miles shy of Santa Cruz, beach babies in thongs, pleasure beach surfers on longboards, all the cool convertibles speeding Cabrillo Highway, women line as pickers, back bent over summer's harvest. The campesinas labor without shade tents or water buffaloes, shrouded in oversized shirts and baggy work pants, disguised as what they are not, faces masked in bandanas under cowboy hats in fields de calzone, slang word for panty fields. The young one named Esther taken in the onion patch, with the field boss's gardening shears at her throat. The older one called Felicia, isolated in the almond orchard and pushed down into a doghouse. The pretty one, Linda, without work papers, asked to bear a son in trade for a room and a job in the pumpkin patch. Isabel, ravaged napping under a tree at the end of a dream after a long morning picking pomegranates. Salome on the apple branch, forced up against the fence as the boss bellowed ecstatic. The promotores flex muscles and words, steal off into night to meet face to face to talk health care, pesticides, heat stroke, rape, meet to tally accounts, forced to exchange panties for paychecks in orchards, on ranches, in fields, in truck beds, to speak out to face deportation to an old country, a new foreign soil. Women of the fields, like those before them, like those who trail after, Las Chinas, Japonesas, Filipinas, to slave for frozen food empires in pesticide drift, residue crawling the skin, creeping into the nostrils, and pregnancies it ends as they hide from La Migra in vines soaked in toxins, or crawl through sewer tunnels, across railroad tracks, through fences to pick strawberries. For this, la fruta del diablo. And that's what they call the strawberry picking, the devil's fruit. I'll read this one more that links my passion for the pickers to my own family. This one's called On the Road, Hijacked by Memory, and has a Cesar Chavez epigraph that says, "We draw our strength from the very despair in which we have been forced to live." Driving the lazy Sunday afternoon along the sun-drenched blacktop stretch through California's Central Valley, its pastures peppered by bulls and slaughterhouse steer, dense with migrants, some sporting the UFW eagle on caps, packing farm workers into growers' white school buses, porta potties in tow, all of them off to bend and hoe, chop and prune, pick and haul, the ag giants, nuts and roots and fruits for Walmart supercenters. In the car's back seat, onion dome churches crop up in my head, their rows of candles lit again for all my dead, for the Ukrainian grandfather, face reddened from the heat of hot steel, muscles knotted and clothes grimy, who choked to death struggling to form words in a strange tongue, lungs dense in smoke and soot, air and water fouled by the job he did forging Pittsburgh steel. For the Slovak one who took UMW picket signs to the coal bosses instead of a pick and shovel, down into the dark, dank shafts of the Windber mine. Survived a cave-in, but did not survive being robbed by the company town or coal dust polluting his chest. For my mother on the assembly line, night shift, inspecting pots and pans for dimples and blisters, her back aching, and always home on time to cook breakfast, get me off to school. For my father at pressed steel welding railroad cars in the McKees Rocks bottoms, tagged Cossack, and taunted to jump and spin and kick, who got lost in a bottle of vodka and Thorazine, just another blue collar chasing down a middle-class life. But the range here along this California stretch runs ragged in rain shadow in a watery-eyed sky above tract homes and trailer camp estates, billboards boasting sprouting condos, commercial real estate for Ness's Purina Works, another Chrysler Jeep dealership along the strip mall next to wheat and oats and alfalfa, the Delta's humpback hills carpeted green in spring, all predictable, unlike this Sunday day trip hijacked by memory, then released to detour along a bumpy back road. My own breath, now heavy laden, my every muscle aching. Thank you.
Our next reader is Adrienne Oliver. She is a part-time faculty here at Laney in the English department, but you would never know it by how present she is, how much she shows up, and how much work she always does. Whether it's her hip-hop pedagogy of liberation with the Gateway to College program or grinding it out on Task Stream, she's there. She earned a BA in psychology from Hendrix College and a Master's of Arts in Professional Technical Writing from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and a Master's of Fine Arts in English and Creative Writing from Mills College, and she's also getting her EDD now at Mills College. She can often be found hanging out with her writer friends, gabbing about her first novel in progress. Welcome, PhD.
So I'm going to eventually move the podium to the sides and then do a little bit of movement. And I'm going to use this opportunity to raise some awareness about Crohn's and colitis. It's a group of digestive disorders that affects people as young as 12. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 13. And before I go into the piece, I just want to read a little bit about it. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are known together as inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are painful, medically incurable illnesses that attack the digestive system. It is estimated that over 1.6 million Americans have IBD. However, many more suffer in silence. So I hope that this piece speaks to those who are suffering in silence. You'll hear me talking about my sister. She was really instrumental to my silence breaking, and you know, this is Women's History Month, so I really want to celebrate her as the person who, when I was 13 years old, dealing with the symptoms of ulcerative colitis, not knowing what to do, it was my baby sister Angela, who was, I think she was 7 years old at the time, who was like, Mama! So this is going to be dedicated to her. This segment is for quiet writers who have considered screaming when the silence is enough. These troubled women housing these self-imposed borders that operate as little recognized chains, yielding us underperforming. At this moment of change, those walls are falling. down. And thus begins my own battle story at the point of an incision into flesh. It all started with an incision. Doctor's decision that the collision in my tiny body was too much. It was the impact of this and that, hole in the wall, hole in the wall, that made the blood fall, that made the blood fall in my water, down the drain. I soon could not contain, I called my sister's name, Angel A, Angel A, Angel of Light, giving mama's blind eyesight to the blood fall, the blood that falls, bloody in my water down the drain. Angela's face is a vision of spring, hours of pink and yellow follow her wherever she goes. She is Curtis Mayfield cool and Van Morrison strong. At times, her brows become furrowed with Badu contemplations, and she becomes sustained with thoughts of a nature walk with her sister. It all started with that incision, gaining my conscience and vision. At time, I would heal, and in time I define. In time I would heal, and in time I'll be fine. Thank you. I'm just really grateful for all the wonderful people I'm blessed to work with here. So I'm not very good at introducing myself. I'm Jackie Graves. What's up? I have taught English here for 10 years. I'm the co-chair of the English department for the first year and the tutoring coordinator. This is my first year doing it as well. So I'm not actually in the classroom, but I may be teaching creative writing again here soon. I took a semester off from school a few years back when my sister had a stroke, and since then my life has not really ever been the same. She lives now in New York with most of my family, and I am constantly torn back to the East Coast to take care of them. And this is a hot, fresh piece that was written very recently about kind of how I spent my Christmas vacation. It's called See Through the Eyes of Love. When I see the numbers in my sister's bank account, my heart stops. Thousands of dollars of check deposits and withdrawals in the last 3 days. She let these scammers access her bank account, deposit fake checks, and then she withdrew the money and Western Unioned it to Nigeria. After everything I said, she did it again. When my sister picks up the phone, I don't have my patient, loving, understanding sister voice. Instead, I sound like someone crazed. What did you do? Where is the money? It's gone, my sister says. What's wrong with you? How can you do this again?
I'm trying to understand how she could have fallen victim to another online scam. I wish she would stop yelling at me, she says. I am not yelling, I yell. This is an intervention. Okay, she says in that Pollyanna cracker voice that shows she has no idea what I'm talking about, no idea of the consequences of her actions, and no intention of changing her behavior. No, Mo, it is definitely not okay, I scream. I feel sick. I'm sick of her. My brain-damaged sister has made another mistake, a big Nigerian nightmare of a mistake, and I'm the one who has to fix it. 6 years ago, my 37-year-old sister lay in a coma after a major stroke, and the doctors gave her a 3% chance of waking up. Miraculously, she did. One miracle became many. She learned to talk again, walk again, slowly, step by step. The doctors ventured no rosy prognosis. Every brain injury was different, they told my family, so every recovery is different. We'll have to see where she ends up, they said. I remember stiffening at those words. I couldn't accept that my sister would end up something other than her fully functional Yale graduate nurse midwife self. I believed my faith was crucial to her recovery. After all, she was a miracle. Her sense of humor, her gift for storytelling, her warmth and empathy had already returned. You're one of the lucky ones, the social worker told us. 16 million Americans, 1 in every 17, suffer some form of brain impairment. Not just stroke survivors, but veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, survivors of car accidents, gunshot wounds, football players with concussions. Many will never function independently again. My sister is now able to navigate New York City subways by herself, go to doctor's appointments, pick up her daughter from first grade. You could sit down and have a conversation with her and never know she had a stroke. In many ways, she is lucky, but her disabilities are largely invisible. Blank spaces in short and long-term memory, impaired decision-making and judgment, which make her vulnerable. The more she improves, the more danger she's exposed to. Lately, she's become obsessed with online dating. She met a guy online who said he wanted to marry her, claimed he was going to inherit millions of dollars. She gave him her name and address so his lawyer could create a power of attorney. When he asked for $1,700 in lawyer's fees, she sent him her rent money. Why would you send money to someone you don't know? I asked, the patient educator in me, trying to show her the illogic of her actions. You don't understand, she replied, like I was slow to get it. He's going to inherit millions. Maureen, you haven't even met him. I wasn't going to marry him, she said with the most rational of voices. We had to meet each other and see if we liked each other first. The first time my sister Weston reunioned her money to another continent, I rallied the troops. I called her doctor, her cognitive therapist, my 2 sisters, my mother, her best friend, the Medicaid trust, the rent agency. I talked to her on the phone from California for hours. I made a plan, I came up with a solution, I fixed it. 1 month later, when it happened again, I could barely get out of bed. I pulled up the covers and turned on Netflix. Because of my interest in female-driven action-adventure, Netflix recommended Scandal. I realize I'm late to the Scandal game. People were watching and tweeting and blogging about it seasons ago. Here was Kerry Washington as Olivia Pope. A woman who could fix things, a strong black woman in control, power walking into every room, perfect pumps, tailored pants, handling her business. I'm really good at my job, she told anyone who asked. As I obsessively binge-watched Scandal, I realized that like Olivia Pope, I was the fixer in my family, so caught up in other people's problems that I ignored my own. Growing up the older middle child of 4 daughters below the poverty line in New York, I was accustomed to constant crises. I'd found ways to excel in impossible circumstances, taught 20 years at different under-resourced schools in Oakland, the Bronx, New York, finding ways to make my students feel valued and supported despite budget cuts and bureaucracy. I tell myself, just work harder, stay positive, you got this. But with my sister's latest Nigerian nightmare, I reached the extent of my endurance. I could no longer go on. I could no longer tell myself, just work harder. My sister's health crisis is a wake-up call for me. I have my own healing work to do. On a break from my scandal binge, I spoke to an energy healer. She told me I needed to align myself with my purpose, put myself back in the center of my own life. When it came to my sister, she told me, see through the eyes of love. Respect that she's on her own journey and will make her own choices. I'm having a hard time with that one, I said. It's hard to see through the eyes of love when I have to pay the consequences for her terrible choices. You can't take it on for her, my healer insisted. You can't be the source for her. It will never ground down through you. It's not yours to clear. Yes, you can help, but don't take it on energetically. Rather than feeling like it's your duty, like it's all on you, see through the eyes of love. After a day of phone calls and emails and banks telling me I'm liable for thousands of dollars because my name is on her account, I realize the sun is going down and I'm still in my pajamas. I need to get out of the house and breathe some fresh air. I walk out at the marina, a fitness trail where families often walk or bike or scoot together. In the dusk, it's not very crowded, and by the end of my walk, the sky is black. I look at the stars that have just come out, gleaming like jewels with glints of white and blue, then green, fire red, and calm washes over me, like I'm in the presence of something divine. You're gonna be okay. See through the eyes of love. I need to tell my sister something. I text her, Mo, I want you to know that even though I'm really upset about what happened, I love you very much. She texts back, thanks, Jack, I appreciate that. Almost as an afterthought, I add, please let me know right away if these scammers contact you again. She responds, I did get a call tonight. The uncle of the guy said he was going to deposit money into my account and then provide instructions on where to send it. Fury whirls up in me. She wasn't going to tell me it contacted her again? It's beyond comprehension. And then I realized brain damage is beyond comprehension. It's not her fault. I can't be mad at her. And if I hadn't approached her with love, I still wouldn't know. Instead of yelling, I ask, why didn't you tell me? Because he scares me. What are you scared of? He's threatening and speaks with a thick accent. He said he'd hurt you if I told you. I realize my sister is not just brain damaged and dumb and ruining my life. She's trying to protect me in some warped way. The world must be terrifying to her with her new brain. She can't see her way out of problems. She can't even think to call me for help. I've been so frustrated with her, I hadn't even thought about how she felt. Seeing through the eyes of love is a different way of seeing. It's feeling compassion rather than judgment, empathy rather than resentment, generosity rather than duty. It's no small order, but it's a different order than work harder. It's more like surrender. It's hard for my inner gladiator to lay down my sword and to surrender to that which I can't control. I do go gladiate on her bank accounts, replace her smartphone with a flip phone, end her internet access, terminate her online dating accounts, change her phone number, put out fraud alerts, and transfer her finances into my name. But I've learned that I can't fix Mo. Even Olivia Pope couldn't fix Mo. Mo has to fix Mo. I still have faith that all of my sister will return someday. I religiously read the research about neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to heal and change, and draw from this well of hope on dark days. But I have to protect my sister until then, and remember to see through the eyes of love, including the way I see myself. Over there if people are interested. Thank you guys so much.